My father teaches me how to handle a pistol. Twin Rugers resting side by side on the emerald felt for the good times, playing low through evening's kitchen as he takes them apart and puts them back together. How can I know what he's remembering as he shoves one grip first into my hesitant hand and swallows the last of the Malbec, his stained lips cracking into a rare, authentic smile? He cannot imagine the first gun I held belonged to a boy who loved me too much when he pointed it my way. Cannot know I'm still holding its lead back with the force of my eyes, where my father says his grandmother Elsie lives now to terrorize him. I think about her working those molten fields, how tough she must have been living alone with two of the meanest men in our family of mean men. When I learn how tough it is to pull back on the slide, I think of her. Pretty yellow Negro, the men say, so poor her mule had no name, its ribs visible across the field where she stood watching her father in law Spence beat blood and foam from it. When I learn to lock the lever and look down the chamber, I think of her, oiled pistol exhausted at her dirt stained thigh, hand on her hip, insouciant and tired, just tired. Don't ever put your finger on the trigger unless you're ready to pull it, my father says. So I keep it straight, learn what she was tested by to get eyes old enough to hold a bullet still.
Hi, welcome to Brown Girl Book Lover. I'm Leslie and Murray. Today, Joy Priest is joining me to talk about her poetry collection, Horsepower. Joy Priest is the author of Horsepower, winner of the 2019 Donnell Hall Prize for Poetry from AWP. Her work has appeared in ESPN, Gulf Coast, Mississippi Review, The Rumpers, and The Atlantic. She has facilitated writing workshops with incarcerated juveniles and adult women, and has taught composition, rhetoric, comedy, and African American arts and culture at the university level. She's currently a doctoral student in literature and creative writing at the University of Houston. Joy, welcome to Brown Girl Book Lover.
Hi, how are you doing?
In the collection, the speaker and her father shares very intimate moments around ideas we would not deem intimate, learning to be invisible, learning how to cope with racism within the family structure, and learning how to protect herself.
I've never thought about this, so thank
Yeah.
you. I'm just kind of thinking through it in real time right now, but I suppose it comes out of the moments of intimacy between the speaker and the speaker's father. In the beginning of this nonlinear narrative that I've sort of constructed across the book, the speaker's kept from her Black father for most of her childhood because of her racist mother's father, her racist white grandfather. And so a lot of time is lost between the speaker and her father. And I think that, you know, these are the moments of intimacy that the father is able to offer position of masculinity from his position of masculinity. So these conversations that he's having with her is sort of these moments where he's revealing his emotional interior, and it's about like, you know, being able to be elusive or being and then so it goes back to horsepower, it goes back to waywardness, it goes back to fugitivity, like sort of passing down these sort of emotionally fraught moments of danger and how to survive them, but also in sort of that traditional way where we talk about like Black parenting and that added, necessity of having to like talk to your children about staying safe in these different kinds of ways, but also, like, so also how to protect yourself. Like, I'm Southern, so it might not it might not translate to Northerners, but like learning how to use a gun is like a a tradition. I'm thinking about like Robert F. Williams, Negroes with Guns, and I'm thinking of Nikki Finney's poem in particular called Negroes with Guns about that, where the father in the poem is showing his daughter how to use a gun, and so those moments traditionally I think don't feel um, like sites of intimacy, but are in the context of a black father and his daughter, perhaps. You know.
In Horsepower, right? The speaker always referenced to running away, wanting to escape, and escaping. And this symbolism, especially with the lush landscape of Kentucky, conjure up for me the enslaved becoming self-liberated, and how to be Black in America. We're in a perpetual run because we're always trying to set ourselves free from racism and the social ills. And I
Mhm.
kept seeing this idea of running away, and we're like, is it me just being like too literary, or were you making those connections?
For my women and gender studies thesis, because I got that degree at the same time, I wrote a paper called "Towards a Black Femme Fugitive Poetics," and I was talking how I was focused on three Black Southern poets: Nikki Finney, Natasha Trethewey, and Vivie Francis, and talking about how fugitivity isn't just this theory; it's like a literal. It's literally encoded in the laws and the Constitution of the United States and the Fugitive Slave Act, and
Mhm.
it's sort of so I think like when I see an extrajudicial killing in the street, a police officer killing a black person, it's actually sort of foundational to the law that free black person is a fugitive. It's in the Constitution as we speak, and so and I was thinking of that, but I was also thinking about um, what that, how that, what sort of the speaker growing up in the household of her white mother and her white grandfather, and how complicated. I was really wanted to put right against this idea that I feel like I kept hearing like um, Obama, like post Obama, like post racism. That term we kept hearing like right after Obama, and this idea that because you're married to or you have black children that you can't be racist or something. So I really wanted to like show the difficulties of the dangers to black children in white spaces, even in the space of their own one of their parents, and what it means to be, sort of delineated as fugitive in that space. And
Mm,
I was also thinking about specifically what fugitivity looks like for black women, uh,
mhm.
because I think oftentimes the black experience is still told or sort of shown through the male gaze, and um and so I was thinking about particularly in the South, like, and I know this is probably, I mean, for black women I think it translates throughout most regional cultures, but the idea that you're first. I was just watching the Harper's Bazaar interview between Megan Thee Stallion and Representative Maxine Waters,
Mhm.
and Caitlin Greenridge, which I think you probably know, doing
Yeah.
what you. She moderates the conversation and she brings in Sadia's Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments. And I was like, oh, this was good to read right before I talked to Leslie Ann, because that's a lot of what I was thinking about,
Mhm.
particularly in the of the book. And the last section is this fugitivity, specifically of the black woman. And what does that mean? It's like, you know, not sticking around to love and live for everyone else and yourself last,
Yeah.
but save yourself first, to get out of a situation first so that you can sustain yourself. So I think that, if anything, one of the takeaways I want to be is, which I made them leave on the back of the book, is that the book is a cinematic escape narrative that radically envisions a daughter's waywardness as aspirational. That it's okay as a young black girl to like want to get away and
Mhm.
sustain yourself,
And it's definitely cinematic. It's so funny you say that word because when I was reading your book, I had this dream like 2 days before that I was on this train And I was in the back of the train looking out as the train pulls away. And I'm just passing everything. And it stops by this like train station, but it's full of books. And I want to touch the books, but the train is moving fast. And I feel like that's how I feel when I'm reading your book. I don't, it's just like these images, they're horsepower. It's these
Yeah.
images that are moving, and you're feeling it. And you can't contextualize everything, but it's impacting you, and you have to go back again and read it again to feel the source of it.
Yeah. I thank you for that. This when people say like, oh, it's a muscular collection or whatever, like I'm like I really leaned in that because I was like, yeah, like I'm a hot girl, like I'm a former hood rat. Life
Mhm.
is fast, the way I grew up. It's like I leaned into that like intensity, the violence of the space, the speed of the space, and all of that, and then trying to escape that, like trying to outrun that. And certainly now, as a 32-year-old PhD far away from home, I'm like working on practices of like slowing down and meditation and that sort of thing. But I really, really did let that energy into the book. And I also think it's cool because I think in terms of like Western civilization, like in art and everything, there's this like, particularly in literary poetry, there's this, pressure to write with restraint and subtlety and a light touch and those sort of things, decorum and so forth. And I'm like not interested in that. So so yeah, I think it is a very like, but at the same time I hope that for that reason that people will want to read the book more than once,
Yeah.
and catch stuff, because I think my favorite experiences with poetry is like poems are books that I feel so um imagistically overwhelmed by and want to go back and keep seeing what new things that I find that I didn't see the first time or whatever.
Tracy K. Smith said poetry is a language that sits really close to feelings that defy language. Poetry nudges one of our feelings of joy or confusion or desire towards feelings that we can recognize and describe. What is poetry to you?
That's so close to, I'm gonna talk away from that and try to figure out in the meantime. Poetry names what is being thought or felt. It's something about like our feelings on the verge of articulation. Poetry is that finally that articulation of like what is so far been nameless. That's these feelings that we have, and it's like that sensation when you read a poem and you're kind of envious because the poem describes something that you've thought about or felt many times but didn't know, like didn't make the effort to put into words.
Mhm.
Which I what great writing does. But so perhaps it's something around there. It's like poetry is the effort to name the unnamed, or to name the ineffable, to articulate the ineffable. But of course, if you ask me in 20 minutes, I might have a different definition. you know, uh,
I
yeah.
love your candor. I love it.
I think I've like defined that like different, depending on, it's like, because I'll sit down and think about it, and it's constantly evolving. And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the reasons that I'm a poet, is because I never feel like I have it figured out.
Mhm. That's great because I think so many people feel like they have to have it figured out, especially so many writers when they're on the interview or speaking about their work, they have to have like the beautiful language to say this is what my book is and this is who I am. And it's okay to be in that like luminal space, if I can call it that, or that
Mhm.
space of just like conjuring.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of that, because you asking me stuff that I'm like, oh, well, now I gotta think through this in front of everybody. Yeah, I try to not to doctor answers, because it never feels as good as if I'm just naturally having a conversation, you know. But there are poets who have like beautiful things to say and everything figured out. And I feel like I'm still young. I got time.
Joy, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming up. Thank you for showing up as Joy Priest and nothing else. I
Oh,
appreciate that.
yeah, it's easy. It's been easy talking to you. So thank you so much.
Take care of yourself.